Snow drifts through the Missouri pines, whispering against a shuttered cabin. A lantern sways inside, one slow arc of yellow light, then darkness swallows it whole. In the hollow below, an old horse exhales steam as a thin man tightens his coat and listens. The air is too still. The smell, iron, earth, and something buried, carries farther than it should. His name is Silas Webb, 62, keeper of ledgers and ghosts. In his pocket, a folded letter from a daughter who will never write again. Every road in this valley ends in silence. 7 letters stacked behind his post office counter prove it. Names of the missing inked in his careful hand: Dill, Healy, Dale, Frost, Kern. The town says they ran off. Silas knows better. The pattern lives in his books like a disease. And tonight he's riding into the hollow to open what no one else will touch, a well capped with new planks, nailed down against the truth, because some debts aren't paid with law, they're paid with witness. If stories like this pull at that quiet place inside you, the part that still believes duty outlives fear, stick around. Hit subscribe, share it with someone who values truth over comfort, and stay close. Because men like Silas remind us, evil hides in silence, but someone always keeps the books. Snow moved like smoke across the valley, erasing the road until only memory could guide a man forward. Silas Webb rode slow, his horse's breath clouding the air like some quiet confession rising toward heaven. He had seen worse winters, but this one bit deeper. The cold didn't just touch the skin, it asked questions. Questions about duty, about silence, about how long a man could carry ghosts before they began to speak back. The Howell County Post Office was his chapel. Wood stove humming, walls lined with ledgers, every name and address a kind of prayer he refused to forget. Men trusted him with words meant for home. But tonight the books betrayed him. 7 envelopes lay unclaimed, addressed to a school teacher who had stepped off the mail wagon 2 months earlier and never walked back out of the hollow. Her letters waited. The world did not. He drew the ledger close, running a finger down neat columns of ink. Ada Kern, 1 trunk, 1 carpetbag, signed for delivery to the Emlyn brothers. After that, nothing but silence stretching wider than winter. Silas had learned at Shiloh that patterns meant survival. You recognized the rhythm before the first volley, or you joined the list of names carved in stone. This pattern whispered the same warning. He rose from his chair and looked at the window. Outside, the town lay still, roofs sagging under snow, chimneys breathing slow like sleeping men. Inside, his lamp burned steady, refusing the dark. The sheriff would not listen. Men like Hayes kept peace by pretending trouble didn't exist. But Silas had seen what silence built. It built graves tidy and forgotten, lined with someone else's daughters. He flipped through older ledgers, ink fading, pages crackling. 1896, 1898, 1899. Each year, a name vanished along the same route. A teacher, a nurse, a governess. Always alone, always Piney Hollow. The brothers' names came up too often in town whispers. Virgil and Ezra Emlyn, trappers, hunters, men who kept to themselves, civil enough in the store, but eyes that didn't blink long enough to show a soul. He folded a page into his pocket. The snow outside thickened. Somewhere in the hills, wolves called to one another across frozen timber, their voices rising like memory. Silas heard duty answer back. He locked the door, pocketed his revolver, and stepped into the night. His boots cracked the crusted snow, each step measured like a heartbeat. The road north would carry him toward Piney Hollow. He thought of the unclaimed letters sitting behind the counter. Each one a voice trapped on paper, each one proof that someone had trusted the world and found it false. As he passed the church, he paused. Inside, the oil lamps had burned out, but he could almost hear the congregation, men singing low hymns of endurance. He whispered his own, "Let the record stand." By dawn, the horizon bruised with pale light. The forest closed in, skeletal branches clawing the sky. The mare's hooves thudded soft against frozen mud. He rode until the town was memory. The hollow appeared without welcome, just a thinning of trees, a smell of smoke, and the hush of ground that had seen things better left unspoken. He dismounted and listened. Somewhere deeper in, an axe struck wood. He followed the sound, each echo measuring distance and intent. When it stopped, the silence felt deliberate, like something waiting. The Emlyn cabin rose from the mist, low, narrow, smoke bleeding from a crooked chimney. No footprints led away, only toward. He tightened his grip on the reins. He'd seen strongholds like this in war. Quiet, self-contained, surrounded by nothing but the confidence of men who believed themselves untouchable. He had buried too many like them. A figure appeared in the doorway. Thin, bearded, hands still from years of knowing control. Virgil, by age and posture. He didn't speak, just waited for Silas to step closer. Silas removed his hat. "I've come about a matter of mail," he said. The word sounded smaller than the cold, but truth has its own weight. Virgil's eyes narrowed, not with anger but recognition. "Mail don't go missing here," he said softly. "Only people who lose their way." The door remained open. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, salt, and something faintly metallic. Coats hung on pegs, heavy wool that did not belong to hunters. His gut turned hard. He asked about Ada Kern. Virgil shrugged. "Never heard the name." But lies have a rhythm too, and Silas had learned to count beats between truth and denial. This one came too late. Ezra entered from the back room, broader, silent, eyes fixed, a dog in human shape, waiting for command. His hands were clean, too clean for a man who trapped for a living. Silas pointed toward the barn. "I'll have a look around." Virgil's jaw flexed, then released. "Nothing there but tools and traps," he said. The kind of answer that's almost true. The barn door groaned open. Cold air bit through the smell of old blood and oil. Hanging traps lined the walls in careful order, each one polished, each one ready. Beneath the rafters, straw shifted under draft. He kicked it aside. A brass latch glinted, half-buried trunk, initials dulled by dirt. AK. He didn't breathe for a long moment. He turned. Virgil stood in the doorway, expression carved from wood. "Found yourself a chest," the man said. "Bought it off a drifter, worth $2. Fair trade." Silas nodded, though his mind ran ahead, seeing what must lie beneath the surface. In his world, truth was a body buried under polite conversation. He left the barn and mounted up. No accusations, not yet. Just names in a ledger, patterns of silence, and a trunk that told a story the town refused to read. As he rode, the hollow behind him seemed to hold its breath. Trees leaned inward like listeners. Snow fell heavier, erasing his tracks before they could harden. The law would demand proof, but men like Hayes feared paperwork more than evil. Silas would bring proof, the kind that bled and could not be denied. He rode until the post office lantern came into view, small and gold against the frost. He tied the mare, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him. He sat at the desk and opened his personal ledger. Ink shone black under lamplight. He wrote 4 names, steady hand, unwavering. Beneath them, he added one more, Ada Kern. Then he underlined them all, once, twice, until the page trembled. He wrote one sentence beneath, "Someone will answer for this." The stove popped and sighed. Outside, the wind carried through the alleys like distant artillery. He felt the same weight in his chest as he had in every battle. When dawn came again, the streets would wake, and men would nod to him, unaware that war had already been declared. Only this time, the enemy wore familiar faces. He leaned back, listening to the wind press against the walls. The world was cold, but his resolve burned hotter than lamp oil. Justice, he thought, doesn't need company, just witnesses. And he would bear witness, even if it meant carrying the dead himself. Because in every ledger, someone must keep the books honest, and tonight, that duty had chosen him. Dawn crawled out of the trees, slow and reluctant, painting the snow in dull iron light. Silas rode through it like a ghost in uniform, the cold turning his breath into smoke that drifted behind him. He hadn't slept. The ledger on his desk had burned in his mind all night, every name written there whispering like a prayer unfinished. By morning, that whisper had become command. He would not wait for law. The hollow stretched before him, 5 miles of frozen ground, black pines, and silence heavy enough to feel like breath on the back of his neck. The mare's hooves cracked frost with every step. He passed the split rock that marked the turnoff, its surface carved with initials of men long dead. Every one of them had fought a battle once, and most had lost something that never grew back. When the Emlyn cabin came into view, it looked smaller than memory. Roof sagging under snow, smoke barely clinging to the chimney. Yet something about it felt alive, aware, watching him arrive. Virgil Emlyn stood on the porch like a man waiting for judgment, his coat buttoned to the throat, his eyes pale and unreadable. He did not raise a hand in greeting, he simply waited. Silas dismounted slow, boots sinking into crusted snow. The cold bit through his gloves as he tied the reins. Behind him, the forest held its breath, as if the world understood what was about to begin. "I told you before," Virgil said, voice soft, patient. "We got no quarrel with town folk. You ride out here by choice, you ride alone." Silas stepped closer until the porch boards creaked under his weight. "A teacher went missing after your wagon stop. So did 4 before her. My books keep count. You want to tell me why?" Virgil's mouth tightened just enough to suggest he'd expected that question. "You think you're owed an answer?" he asked. "The hills don't owe anyone anything, Postman. They take what they please." The door opened behind him. Ezra filled the frame, broader, quieter, his eyes flat as winter sky. He said nothing, only stared, and Silas felt the air thicken between them like sap freezing on bark. He'd seen that look in war, the calm of men who'd done things they could no longer name. They didn't hide guilt. They wore it like armor. "I'm not here for talk," Silas said finally. "I'm here for proof." He stepped past them and toward the barn without permission, the same way he once stepped through smoke toward enemy lines. The brothers followed. Their boots fell heavy, deliberate, a rhythm built from shared secrets. The barn door moaned open, and the smell of blood, lime, and rot rolled out to meet him. Inside, the air hung thick. Traps lined the walls, gleaming with oil. Tools were arranged too neatly, the kind of order that comes from habit born of guilt. The silence itself felt complicit. He walked to the far stall where straw had been brushed smooth. Beneath it, the ground bulged slightly, frozen uneven. He crouched and brushed away the surface until wood showed through, fresh plank, pale against decay. Virgil's voice came behind him, low and even. "That's a feed pit. You'll find nothing there but dirt and salt." Silas stood and faced him. "And if I open it?" "Then you'll owe what you find," Virgil said. "Same as the rest of us." The words landed heavy, not as threat, but prophecy. Ezra's shadow shifted, hand brushing the handle of an axe propped against the wall. The sound of it moving was louder than speech. Silas took a step back, slow, deliberate. His pulse hammered like the drums at Shiloh. "The sheriff will be here before nightfall," he said. "If you're clean, you'll open that pit yourself." Virgil smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belonged to men who already knew endings. "Sheriff don't ride this far when it snows. You know that." Outside, a crow cawed once, harsh and final. Silas took that sound as his signal to leave. He turned, walked past them, and stepped into light thin as ash. Ezra followed him to the edge of the yard. "You think justice comes from ink and ledgers?" he asked. His voice was gravel. "Out here, justice freezes before it's born." Silas met his gaze. "Then I'll thaw it myself." He mounted the mare and rode off slow, keeping his shoulders straight until the cabin vanished behind trees. Only then did he let the tremor leave his breath. The hollow pressed close. Snow fell heavier now, muffling everything. The path blurred, but he followed instinct, same instinct that had kept him alive when bullets made more sense than words. By the time he reached town, the day had collapsed into gray. He tethered the mare outside the sheriff's office and stepped inside, boots dripping onto the wooden floor. Hayes looked up from his paper, jaw working tobacco. "Back already?" he asked. "Tell me you found your ghosts." Silas laid his gloves on the desk. "I found something worse. I found men who stopped being men." The sheriff leaned back, eyes tired. "You got proof?" Silas shook his head. "Not yet. But I saw the hole waiting to be filled. I heard the dirt breathe." Hayes sighed. "Then let it rest. Snow covers everything in time." Silas turned toward the door. "Not everything," he said. "Not what's written." He stepped back into the cold. Street lamps flickered on, their glow reflecting in ice like trapped fire. Somewhere above the rooftops, church bells rang the hour. It sounded too calm for what he carried. He walked to the post office. Inside, the air was warm and still. He hung his coat, poured coffee gone bitter, and sat before the open ledger. The names waited for him. He read each one aloud like scripture: Dill, Healy, Dale, Frost, Kern. He traced his finger under each until the paper smudged. Then he whispered, "Tomorrow." Outside, the wind rose, shaking the shutters like restless souls trying to speak. He knew what they wanted. They wanted someone to keep the promise he had written. When he blew out the lamp, darkness folded around him like a cloak. He didn't fear it. He'd already seen what hid inside. Somewhere in that blackness, the hollow exhaled and the mountain listened. Men could vanish, but truth had a way of finding its own path home. Silas leaned back, eyes closed, hearing again Virgil's voice. "You'll owe what you find." He smiled in the dark, a small, tired thing. "Then I'll pay in full," he said. The clock ticked. The world waited. And in the distance, beyond the ridge, a wolf howled, a sound not of menace, but of promise. Night had weight in the hollow, a living thing pressing down from the hills. Silas rode through it without lantern, trusting the mare's instinct and the pull of what waited beneath frozen ground. The moon showed pale through thin clouds, its light breaking across ice-crusted branches. Every hoofbeat sounded too loud, echoing off trees like heartbeats in a tomb. The world felt paused, listening. He had packed the crowbar, rope, and oil lamp himself. The sheriff had refused to come, calling it folly. That word had followed Silas through wars, and every time he'd proven it wrong. The cabin loomed ahead, a dark tooth against the snow. No smoke from the chimney, no movement, no dogs. Only the faint rattle of wind through the shutters, like breath in an empty chest. He tied the mare behind a thicket and moved on foot, boots crunching softly. The barn door hung open now, swaying slow. Inside, moonlight pooled across straw, revealing what men chose not to see. The feed pit lay uncovered, boards stacked neatly to one side. Someone had opened it since his last visit. The air above it shimmered faintly with the scent of lime and something older. He knelt, listening. Nothing but silence rising from the dark. He lit the oil lamp and lowered it by rope, watching flame reflections crawl across stone walls slick with moisture. Then came shape, cloth, bone. He turned away, breathing through his sleeve. Justice was never clean. It reeked of truth too long buried. He covered the pit, not to hide it, but to keep the dead from seeing what came next. A noise came from the cabin. One step, then another. He drew the revolver and waited, heartbeat steady. The door creaked open and Virgil's voice drifted out soft as dust. "Couldn't sleep, Postman?" Silas stepped into the open, lamplight trembling in his hand. "You buried them," he said. No accusation, only fact. The kind a man didn't need the law to confirm. Virgil sighed, almost kindly. They wouldn't stop coming, each one thinking she could tame what this place is. We just made sure the hills stayed quiet. Ezra appeared behind him, broad-shouldered, holding an axe as casual as breathing. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said. "Now we've got to add another name." Silas raised the gun, his voice calm. "You've taken enough names. I came to write the last one." The hammer clicked back, sharp and final. For a moment no one moved. Snow fell between them, white flakes crossing the dark like ashes. The world narrowed to 3 men and a well full of history. Virgil smiled faintly. "You think killing us changes the books?" he said. "The land's already written its own." "Then let it witness," Silas answered, and fired once. The shot cracked through the trees, echoing like thunder that refused to fade. Virgil fell backward, mouth open, eyes already empty. Ezra roared, charging, but the snow betrayed him. He slipped, stumbled, and Silas fired again. The bullet caught shoulder instead of heart. The axe dropped. Ezra kept coming. They collided hard, crashing into the snow. The revolver flew from Silas's hand, vanishing into drifts. Fists found faces. Breath came ragged, heavy, desperate. Each man fought for more than life. Silas reached for the crowbar, swung blind. Metal struck bone with a sound that didn't belong in nature. Ezra went still, eyes unfocused, breath leaving in steam that froze before it rose. Silas sat back, gasping, the world spinning around him. His hands shook, his knees burned. He looked at the 2 brothers lying there, the snow already beginning to cover them. He dragged their bodies to the well one by one, not out of vengeance but completion. The dead beneath would have their witnesses. The land would have its truth back. When it was done, he lit a match and dropped it down. The flame fell slow, trailing smoke. For an instant, the hollow's secrets glowed gold before fading to ash. He turned toward the east, where faint light hinted at morning. His body ached, but his mind felt stripped clean. Justice wasn't triumph. It was absence, silence where lies used to live. He found the mare waiting, patient and calm, steam rising from her nostrils. He touched her neck and whispered, "It's finished," though some part of him knew it never truly was. By the time he reached town, dawn had come fully. Smoke rose from chimneys. Men emerged from homes, unaware the hollow had emptied itself of monsters during the night. He tied the mare outside the post office, stepped inside, and sat before the ledger. His gloves left blood on the wood, dark and honest. He didn't bother to wipe it away. He opened to the last page, wrote slowly, deliberately, Virgil M. Lynn, Ezra M. Lynn, found guilty by the land itself. He underlined it once, hand steady, heart quiet. He poured whiskey from the drawer, swallowed once, and let it burn through him like truth. The town bell tolled 6. Another ordinary morning, pretending not to see what it owed. When the sheriff arrived later, Silas would tell him everything, names, the well, the fire he meant to set before noon. But for now, he sat still, letting silence become prayer. The ledger glowed faintly in early light. Outside, the wind shifted east, carrying the hollow's final exhale through town. It smelled of smoke and winter and the end of something terrible. He looked out the window at the road he'd ridden, the one that had led him straight into hell and back. He'd found no glory there, only proof that some men must walk alone. He closed the book, the sound soft as snow settling. His work was done, but duty had no end, only pauses between reckonings. He'd wait for the next. They always came. He stood, straightened his coat, and faced the day. Behind him, the ledger waited open, the ink still wet, the story of what men become when silence rules finally written down. Morning broke cold and hollow, the kind of light that had no warmth left in it. Silas stood by the edge of the ridge, watching smoke rise from the burned-out shell of the Emlyn farm. Ash drifted upward like memory refusing to settle. What had been evil was now dust, but he knew the land didn't forget. Soil kept secrets longer than any man's conscience could endure. The sheriff's men had come at dawn, rifles across their backs, boots crunching through frost. They asked no questions, only worked in silence, lowering ropes into the black mouth of the well. Bodies came up slow, wrapped in burlap and white lime, faceless, weightless in the pale morning air. Each shape a name he'd written years before in his careful script. The ledger had not lied. Hayes stood beside him, jaw set, eyes hollow. "You did what we wouldn't," he said quietly. "Now we've got to live with that." Silas didn't answer. Some truths were too heavy for sound. The coroner's wagon creaked away down the road, wheels grinding over ice. Behind it, the smoke from the cabin leaned with the wind, bending east as if bowing to the dead. Silas remained alone long after the others left, the revolver heavy in his coat pocket. He wasn't sure anymore whether he carried it for protection or remembrance. Both felt the same now. The ground beneath his boots was warm, where fire had eaten deep. He knelt, pressed his palm to the soil, and whispered the names again. Each one slow, deliberate, like vows renewed. He had seen too much death to believe in mercy, yet part of him wanted to. Maybe the fire had burned more than wood. Maybe it had freed something buried too long beneath fear. By the time he rode back to town, snow had begun to fall again, soft and steady. The world was already covering its scars, pretending the night before had never happened. At the post office, everything looked the same. The ticking clock, the stove's low hum, the faint smell of ink and old paper. He set his gloves down beside the ledger. He opened to the last page, still stained with blood and soot. The ink had blurred, but the meaning remained. Justice wasn't a word, it was endurance. It was the act of remembering. He dipped his pen, wrote one final line. Case closed. The land keeps what men forget. Then he closed the book, pressing his hand flat against the cover as if sealing it forever. The bell above the door rang, and Jacob Marsh stepped in, the young laborer who'd helped him raise the well's truth from darkness. His face was pale, his eyes tired. "They're saying you went too far," Jacob said softly, "that the law would have handled it different." Silas looked at him, the corner of his mouth barely turning. "The law sleeps when it snows," he said. "We don't." Jacob nodded once, understanding more than he could say. He poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of the older man, and sat across from him in silence. Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the window panes. Somewhere far off, the church bell began its slow tolling, calling the town to mourn what it had refused to see. Silas stared into the steam curling from his cup. "You ever wonder," he said quietly, "if some men are born to keep count and others to look away?" Jacob sipped and said nothing. The fire in the stove popped once, scattering sparks. In that sound lay more truth than any sermon could carry. When Jacob left, the office fell silent again. Silas sat alone, tracing invisible lines across the desk with a fingertip, as though counting names only he could hear. He had thought victory would feel lighter. Instead, it pressed harder. The dead rested, but their weight stayed with the living. Duty didn't fade. It grew roots. By evening, the snow had deepened. Lamplight glowed faintly against the glass, turning the office into a small golden island amid the dark. He found comfort in its quiet precision. He pulled his coat from the peg, stepped outside, and looked toward the ridge. Smoke no longer rose there. Only the whisper of wind through pines marked the place. He walked to the edge of town where the road curved east. Beyond that bend lay the hollow, now a scar under white. He tipped his hat once to it, a soldier saluting an old battlefield. Then he turned away. Some wars never ended, but this one had said enough. The land would carry what was left, and that would be enough. The sheriff's voice came faintly from the courthouse steps, calling his name. Silas didn't answer. He walked on, boots crunching through untouched snow, until the sound faded behind him. Each step left a dark mark that filled slowly with drifting flakes, disappearing as soon as it formed. The world erased him gently, the way it erased all things that had done their part. By the time he reached his home above the post office, the lamp had burned low. He sat at his desk one last time, opened the window, and let the cold air wash the room clean. On the shelf beside him, the ledger waited, closed, bound, heavy. He touched it once more, fingers lingering on the spine, then turned away. Some stories were never meant to be reopened. He poured the last of the whiskey, raised it slightly, and murmured to no one, for those who kept the count. The words vanished into the quiet like breath on glass. Outside, the church bell stopped. The night held still. Snow kept falling, soft, relentless, honest. It didn't mourn or celebrate. It simply covered everything evenly, as justice should. Silas leaned back, eyes on the drifting white beyond the window. His hands were steady now, his heart finally slow. He had done what was required. That was all any man could do. The town would sleep easy again, believing evil was gone. But the hills remembered. The earth beneath them carried every secret, every name, every reckoning left unfinished. And somewhere deep inside that cold soil, beneath the roots and stones, the ledger of the land stayed open, waiting for the next man brave enough to read it.